Hello there, what is up, YouTubers? This is Alex Clevenger again from the channel Code Red 2001, and today I am here to do yet another WWE DVD review. This time it's on the Monday Night War. Without a doubt, this is one of my favorite storylines in the history of wrestling. Both major wrestling television shows took place on prime time on Monday nights. WWF's Raw is War, and on the other hand, WCW's Monday Nitro. Back in them days, the dispute of which of the two was better was real. You were either a fan of WWF or you were a fan of WCW. If you were alive back in that generation, you knew exactly what I'm talking about. I personally like both, but if I had to pick between the two, I'd have to go with WWF, because they had talents such as Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, D-Generation X, Mankind, Undertaker, Kane, and all them guys. However, WCW, on the other hand, was good too, because they had Goldberg, the NWO, Sting, Diamond Dallas Page, Booker T, the Total Package Lex Luger, and all them guys. Anyway, let me get this review underway. Here, I'm going to read this passage here on the back. Now it can be told. In 1995, two wrestling companies squared off on Monday Night Television to compete head-to-head in an unprecedented confrontation. On one side, Vince McMahon, the promoter who created WWE and made the industry what it is today. On the other, WCW, owned by media giant Ted Turner and run by an ambitious man named Eric Bischoff. This is the whole story, told by those who created it, lived it, and survived it, the Monday Night War. And that it really was the one-on-one confrontation. WWF's Raw versus WCW's Nitro. Anyway, and now I'm going to open up the case. I'm going to flip this paperwork over to read the chapters off to you. To start off the disc with, we got the early days of WCW and WWE. That's when they talk about the start of both the promotions. WCW was still run by Ted Turner before he let Eric Bischoff start it to create Nitro and start the war. That's how we get into the chapter Raw Arrives, Talent Leaves. There they talk about the creation of Monday Night Raw, how they made a Disney-themed arena, and how WWF was losing its talent to WCW, such as Hulk Hogan, Macho Man Randy Savage, and Rowdy Roddy Piper. and Raw, and that's how we get into the next chapter, Birth of Nitro. There they talk about how Nitro started in 1995 to square off with WWF's Monday Night Raw, which the show had premiered 2 years prior to WCW Nitro in 1993. So that's how you get The War Begins. Because Nitro was the show that started a war. And to start out with, Nitro was always beating Raw in the ratings. They could not keep up with WCW. They had a lot of the good talent that once WWF had, like I was mentioning earlier. Hulk Hogan, Macho Man Randy Savage, Rowdy Roddy Piper. Another good example they show on here was a woman who wrestled. Her name was Alundra Blaze. In case you don't know who she was one of WWF's top women. She was a blonde-haired girl, and she wore a bodysuit. And at the time, she was the WWF Women's Champion. And when she left WWF to join WCW, she took her title belt along with her and threw it in the trash. That's how we get to WCW takes the lead. Another important factor was two notably NWO members, Kevin Nash and Scott Hall. They were being lured away into WCW in 1996 to start the NWO, which is our next chapter. There it talks about the NWO when once the beloved Hulkamaniac, who was WWF's top star for many years, had turned his back and helped Kevin Nash attack Macho Man Randy Savage, and turned his back and became now known as Hollywood Hogan, the bad guy, and traded in his signature red and yellow attire for black and white, and became the NWO. Back then, the NWO, they were dominating WCW. They started as just a three-man stable consisting of Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, and Hollywood Hogan. They would attack superstars from outside the arena, most notably, like they took Rey Mysterio, picked him up, and threw him into a trailer. They went from being outlaws to a whole army of Badville WCW villains. Also got Scott Steiner, the Giant, now known as the Big Show. You name it. Then when we get into the next chapter, got WCW and Austin. That's where they talk about many years before he became Stone Cold Steve Austin, who you know as the hell-raising, beer-drinking guy with the skull, who we know as Stone Cold Steve Austin, Austin 316. He was in WCW way ahead of his prime as Stunning Steve Austin. He had the long blonde hair. And anyway, and then, meanwhile, he left WCW to join WWF in late 1995. From 1996, the point on where he won the King of the Ring in 1996. Austin 316 was just rising into stardom to eventually become the face of the Attitude Era, as we all remember him as. Which really helped WWF because the next chapter says WWE evolves. It shows aside from Stone Cold Steve Austin, they came up with a lot of other popular characters at that time, including D-Generation X, The Rock, Mankind, Undertaker, Kane. From then on, WWF was started. WCW just couldn't keep up with WWF. Like they talked about, they had some good wrestlers, but a lot of them were just young and upcoming. The only main eventers WCW really had at the time was Goldberg and the NWO. And that's how we get into the next chapter. Mr. McMahon and Austin. As we know, Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Mr. McMahon, the legacy of that rivalry lives on forever. Back in them days, the Attitude Era, as much as the fans all wanted to see Austin, his boss, Vince McMahon, didn't like Austin. They did not get along well. And it was so heated that they even wrestled each other, like in Mr. McMahon's first ever match. There was a no disqualification match on Raw Is War way back in April of 1998. The match ended in a no contest when we saw the birth of Mick Foley's third character, Dude Love, came out, and the match ended in a no contest without a winner. So WWE wins a round. Well, WCW, you knew, you knew your rival promotion WWF was gonna beat you with all their characters evolving and you doing nothing, Eric Bischoff. Vince McMahon was gonna beat you in the ratings. They talked about how Raw beat Nitro in the ratings, and they would not win again for another, 2 years. And from that point on, things only got worse for Eric Bischoff and WCW. As the date they were talking about, January 4th, 1999, on an episode of Raw is War, Mankind won his first ever WWF Championship from The Rock. And from that point on, Nitro was just hurting in the ratings, while WWF kept coming out with more and more new characters, like ones I haven't talked about yet. Including the Olympic gold medalist Kurt Angle, Edge and Christian, the Hardy Boys, the Dudley Boys. They're coming out with just more and more new characters, and they still had the old ones as well as Stone Cold Steve Austin, D-Generation X, Mankind, The Rock. That's again the next chapter. Ric Flair, who was WCW's longtime in-ring veteran back when they were known as NWA. It showed them in a ring. Ric Flair came out and tried to bring back the Four Horsemen. Which did not help WCW, because WCW still, in the next chapter, WCW struggles. All they had was just some undercard superstars who could not keep up with all the talent WWF had. As talent goes to WWE, show fans who are now made their mark in WWE, such as Chris Jericho, Eddie Guerrero, Chris Benoit, the Big Show, then known as the Giant, Rey Mysterio, Dean Malenko. Them guys all started to get pissed off with Eric Bischoff. And started to leave WCW to go to WWF. And that just explains how things only got worse for WCW since the Mankind defeated The Rock for the WWF Championship to win his first ever world title. Title which I talked about earlier on in this video. Says more changes at WCW. Ted Turner decided to sell, not only let Eric Bischoff run WCW, but to sell the company to him as well. He did give Eric Bischoff the rights to his own video library, just like WWE did. But then that did not do anything. They've lost a lot of good superstars. Stars, so that's how it gets this. The last chapter. Things only worsened for WCW until the date March 26th, 2001. The biggest change ever came. WCW was not moving in the right direction to keep a good competition with WWF. So the night WWF won the war, WCW was bought out, now under ownership of World Wrestling Federation, now known as World Wrestling Entertainment. And WWF now, as that brings me into today, Vince McMahon in WWE, he owns everything anymore, Vince McMahon. He's also bought out other promotions such as ECW, AWA too, besides just WCW. And overall, this was a pretty decent documentary. I know several of the fans who've watched this have been giving it a negative review, but considering I take interest in the competition between Raw and Nitro, the storyline known as you all know as the Monday Night War, but like this documentary is only 3 hours long. They could have talked a little bit better of detail. Superstars they never talked about on this tape is DDP, Booker T. They could have given it a little bit more of an in-depth look, but oh well. I did think this is a very good documentary. It's only a 1-disc set, so you could tell it's older, because they hardly make any 1-disc sets anymore. Nowadays, it's a 3-disc set made by WWE. This came out in like 2003 or 2004, so it's pretty old. But despite that fact, I thought this is a great documentary. I learned a lot on this about the Monday Night War. And yep, that would include this DVD review. But before I go, let me show you the cover. Here's the front of it. We see it says World Wrestling Entertainment presents the Monday Night War. And we see the 2 promoters for each promotion. Vince McMahon, owner of WWF. And Eric Bischoff, the man who Ted Turner started Nitro and let Eric Bischoff run. And then we see the two logos. Raw is War versus WCW Monday Nitro. Here's what the stem of it looks like. It has the title labeled on the side. Up here's the WWE home video logo. And here's the back. Here is the passage that I read to you. And we see Mankind being held up by D-Generation X, holding his WWF title belt to celebrate his first ever world title win. There we see Stone Cold Steve Austin pouring beer on the boss, Vince McMahon. There we see D-Generation X on the Army Jeep to sell on the night that they invaded WCW and tried to break in. D-Generation X, they've always been one of my favorite wrestling stables, if not my most favorite of all time. There we see the NWO, Scott Hall, Hollywood Hogan, and Kevin Nash. Well, fans, thank you for tuning in today. This is Alex Clevenger from the channel Code Red 2001. And please subscribe. And feel free to tune into my next YouTube video. Thank you. Goodbye.